All right, 803-0550. On the Western Hotline is Chad DeDominicis. We're going to talk a little Sabres about the game, about the trades that have not happened, that we maybe hoped would happen. Chad of ExpectedBuffalo.com, the Expected Buffalo podcast. Chad, good morning. It's Jeremy and Joe. Thanks for some time. Thanks for being on again.
Not a problem. Good morning, guys. I'm with you guys. I also hate the Eagles, but
Good. Chad, you and I were tweeting a little bit back and forth last night about, before we get to trades and stuff like that, about the fallout from last night's game, the takeaways from it. People like to make this about a full team being soft versus what happens in the moment. Where do you ultimately land on how yesterday went in the, whatever, if you want to make it a bigger picture about the organization, or should it be kind of isolated to a 3-hour window of hockey?
Yeah, I think it's probably both. I think if I'm going to pick one player on the ice I'm specifically would be annoyed with, it would be Samuelsson.
He seems to be a popular answer to this.
Yeah, he's the one wearing the letter. He's the one who's on the ice to do the, grinder stuff, if you will, as a defenseman. The other guys on the ice were I think Kulik, Zucker. And Zucker, I can't blame, because at one point in the video, you see him literally put his hands up, what happened when the ref blew the whistle. And then, Power, I don't know if he saw it. And again, what is really Owen Power going to do? I know he's big, but that's not his game either. So really, it comes down to Samuelsson. And also, wearing the letter, too. I think that matters. If you're wearing a letter, that should mean something. But I can understand, them saying, they didn't see it in the moment. One reason is because I was there, sitting 14 rows off the ice, and I didn't see it live. It's the puck's going the other way, and you kind of miss it. Your vision, it is what it is. But when you see your best player laying on the ice, you probably should just go grab someone to be sure. But in the moment when you don't do it and the guy's kicked out of the game, I think after that it's kind of over. What I would have wanted to do, and I think honestly what I'm the most mad about, is how awful that power play was after. Not only did you give up a goal, but it was horrendous. I don't even think they had a chance on it. And they gave up another 2-on-1, a 3-on-2, and I'm watching them oh my God, they're going to give up 2 shorthanded goals on this. So yeah, that's where it is. But I think, and it's a bad look. There's no doubt. There's been other times this season where they have answered. So I don't know if it's a whole team thing, but it's a bad look. They can't hide from it, and that's kind of what it is at the end of the day.
Chad DeDominicis with us on the Western Alley. Did you listen to Lindy and also to have a tough time figuring out maybe what he because in one hand he was kind of upset at the idea that the players on the ice would get criticized, but then he talked about just grabbing somebody. I had a tough time figuring out maybe what Lindy's message would have been behind the scenes for that.
Yeah, I was listening on the way home. I same thing. I didn't really hear the questions that well, so maybe that's maybe what I'm confused about. I think maybe he was asked well, you don't play them again. What do you do? And he's I don't. You grab someone else. I don't. Maybe he didn't hear the question because that was the most animated I've seen Ruff all season long. That was kind of the guy I thought we were going to be getting from the beginning. So maybe, I don't know, he was just kind of going and it came out. But yeah, that was a little bit confusing because Samuelsson, same thing. I didn't really hear the question if it was on the bench or in the locker room. He said it wasn't addressed, but Ruff said he told guys not to do anything. So I don't know if people are trying to stick up for people or what it is kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. It was a little bit confusing.
Chad DeDominicis of ExpectedBuffalo.com and the Expected Buffalo podcast covering the Sabres. All right, Chad, so the weekend was a couple of wins. They've won 3 in a row, but I think for a lot of people in this team, they kind of focus to, all right, who knows about GM and coach and what happens if there are changes, blah, blah, blah. But if they're trying to build, as Kevin Adams said, hockey trades, the Elias Pettersson sweepstakes, whether they're over or they're on hold, it felt like the Sabres had a real shot at that. And Vancouver ultimately made a series of different moves. So do you feel like they missed an opportunity here to turn over the franchise, to do something bold? And whether Vancouver backed off or Buffalo backed off by not adding enough in there to get it done, is it over, and how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with, is it over? I don't know that it's over forever. I think it might be over for this season. It kind of felt like what Vancouver did, especially with the Miller trade and then bringing another Pettersson, and Marcus Pettersson, that they committed in a sense to this season and seeing how Elias Pettersson responds, finish out the year without Miller, and kind of makes a push here. They lost last night. The reports out of Vancouver where people were unhappy with Elias Pettersson's performance and stuff like that. So I guess it's kind of keep going. I always felt going into this that they were eventually going to move both Miller and Pettersson. I don't know if they do at the same time before the deadline. I always felt at the end of the day they're just going to move both and reset, I don't want to say reset the franchise maybe, but kind of just reboot and be on their way and get that out of the organization. But they were definitely in it. They felt good about where they were at. They had a good competitive offer on the table. I mean, they had two on there, but really there was one that I think both teams were kind of working towards and working around. And just at the end of the day, I kept telling people like it really comes down to what Vancouver decided to do. And the decision that they made was they were going to move Miller. They were going to bring in another player, and they were going to try to push this team and see how it responded over the second half of the season. When a team makes that decision, there's nothing you can do. Offer more in this. You're negotiating against yourself then, and it's not really. It wasn't that their offer wasn't good enough. It was just that's the direction the team went, and it's frustrating. I understand for people to hear another trade didn't get over the line, and at some point Adams really just has to get one of these big ones done. But for me, this is one of those ones where you just throw your hands up and go, what are you going to do? The team made a decision, and that's what it is. There's nothing you can really do about it.
Right. It's almost like maybe it could have been that they were bidding not against anyone else for Pettersson, but maybe they were bidding against Vancouver from pulling off the Miller trade. Like if it was one of the two, hey, we will add this in if you don't trade Miller and you trade Pettersson instead. I don't know if that's how it worked. Because really from the start, Chad, my skepticism that this would ever get done was less about the Sabres' motivation, but more about why is Vancouver giving up on this? If the problem is kind of centralized in Miller and Pettersson as something in the locker room and the two just don't get along, whatever it is, why would they feel the need to trade both? But what's your stance on that? Because Pettersson's a great player and the age is still completely fine. That's really where I was always at. I never felt like it made sense that Vancouver would get to trading Pettersson.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I was a general manager of Vancouver, I would have did exactly what they did. I would trade the older player with the expensive salary. They got a decent return back for him that they flipped for something else. So I don't blame them for what they did. It's what I would have done. But the reason I think that they would consider moving him is because I think this has been a building thing here for almost like a calendar year now. So if you remember going back to last deadline, Pettersson almost went to Carolina, and there was some contract, thing going on then. So basically it was a threat, we're going to trade you to Carolina then if you don't sign this contract, and a week later he signs his new deal. And then here we are again another year later, basically, and he almost got traded to Carolina again until they backed out and made the move with Colorado. So I think there's just something there that it's not working or sitting well. The media and the fans are really kind of on him. And I think, from reports that, Freeman has put together, that really impacts him. I guess he was, or I don't know if he still is, one of the people who really pays attention to that stuff. Probably not the best thing in the world. But, it ate at him. And it just sometimes the situation doesn't work with a player and a team. And if you can get fair value and you can also get $11.6 million off your cap, you listen to that and, try to reset yourself and get going a different direction with new players. I mean, there's some decisions that are coming up for them. Besser's another one to decide on. So if they use this opportunity to do a quick reset and they use Pettersson as a way to gain assets, not just futures, but hockey players that can help now and go right on that team and then kind of not really take the big of a step back and try to build as a more broader team moving forward.
Expected Buffalo's Chad DeDominicis on the Sabres. Before we let you go, Chad, Joe's got the number. The Sabres are the best team in the NHL in goal differential in the first period. Right? They play great in the first, and clearly they play not so great in the second and the third. I kind of want to half-jokingly say, is it as simple as maybe they should just play like they're never leading? Never try to defend a lead. Just pretend every period is the first period. I don't know how possible that is. But what do you see in the numbers? What do you see in how they play where the first period is amazing and the second and the third are disasters?
Yeah, it's crazy. Sometimes when you see that stuff in a season, you're like, just noise in the data in a sense, goofy year. Mm-hmm. But it's me. I think it was kind of a thing last year, but maybe it was the opposite. Maybe it was the first period was bad and then the other periods were good. But either way,
I think that's I think last year they gave up the lead in the first all the time. It was horrible.
Yeah. So it's a thing with this team, right? Whether it's first, second, third. And from a number standpoint, like, okay, first and second period are different, and you can see that in your head because, well, there's a longer change in the second period, and maybe they struggle with that. They make more mistakes. They can't get out of their zone. So that creates more issues in the second period, and that's why you have that thing. But the third period thing, too, is weird. It's the ties. It's the holding leads. Admittedly, it has gotten a little bit better here. They still have their scary moments. But over the last, couple of weeks, they haven't been blowing these leads. Like last night, maybe a month ago, they would have lost. But they held on in a couple of the games beyond that. They won the game against Nashville when it was tied in the third period, something they haven't done very often at all this season. So I don't really know how you can pinpoint it to what it is. It's structurally, defensively, because some of those games they blow leads, like then you just look at the goaltending. Last night's a perfect example. The first goal in the first minute of the third period comes from the corner. You don't want, you need your goalie to not let that puck in. It was a nice shot, sure, but I think that's happened too often too. So I think it's throughout the entire thing. Your goaltending hasn't been great in certain situations. There's been some penalty issues. Your power play doesn't put the game away when they have a chance. We saw that again last night. So I think it's a whole bunch of things, and I think it all just comes together that the team is just not that good. And in certain moments, it shows up more than others.
Yeah. Chad DeDominicis of ExpectedBuffalo.com and the Expected Buffalo podcast. Chad, thanks as always. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chad. I'm a subscriber to Expected Buffalo.
Yeah. Me too.
Check the podcast as well. Chad's got good sources when it comes to, Sabres' potential movement. There's just not often movement. That's part of the problem.
All right, keep on Pettersson, Canucks fans. Okay. Keep on him.
I've got